Together is a supernatural body horror movie directed by Michael Shanks. It stars Dave Franco, Alison, Brie, and Damon Herriman. The movie is about a couple who move to the countryside to find themselves encountering a mysterious force that horrifically causes changes in their bodies. I've been highly anticipating this movie ever since probably hearing the buzz about it since it dropped at the Sundance Film Festival all the way back in January of this year. I, of course, don't have the luxury of going to these festivals, and distribution rights, especially getting to my country of Ireland, can always be a pain in the ass for how long it takes, as I am only getting to see this movie now, as I thought it would be a fun little date night idea for me and my girlfriend, because let's be honest, who doesn't take their date to see something a little sick and twisted? I was surprised to find out that Michael Shanks is another example of someone who originally started off as a YouTuber who is now making feature films. He started making videos on his channel by the name of Tim Fed, a channel I had never heard of since, well, I'm not from Australia, which is where he is from. But from what I'm seeing, it was an outlet for him to make whatever short films he wanted as he furthered his career, which is great, and in a way inspiring as some jackass sitting in his room judging movies. So with all that being said, is the movie actually any good, and does it earn its place in the Body Horror Hall of Fame? Well, let's find out. I'll start by talking about the performances, leading with Dave Franco. He's known for having roles in movies like Superbad and The Disaster Artist. He's only now probably known as the only Franco brother whose career is actually gonna go anywhere, since we all know what happened with James Franco. I thought the guy did a pretty good job here with the amount of things he had to work with in this. When we are first introduced to his character, he carries himself to be very unsure of things, seeming very insecure and almost awkward, which he plays pretty well. As the movie progresses, Franco delivers some pretty great instances of terror as many of the different things start happening to him and Brie's character. He's especially good at using his face to express these different levels of fear and horror, sometimes managing to bulge his eyes or even bring himself to the verge of tears at times too. There's very few moments in the film where he acts extremely anxious, and I thought he did a good job at portraying that. During the latter half of the movie, he was able to do a lot of physical acting, which is hard to fully judge, as I'm not entirely sure how much of it was all him and how much was, say, a stunt double or even just the use of CGI to help him move in certain ways. But from the occasions where I could see it was him, he did pretty good at it. His chemistry with Alison Brie's character on screen is great to see. If I didn't mention already, the two are a couple in real life, but I'm sure their dynamic plays out differently, as what we see in this movie is how Franco is increasingly attached to Brie's character, which he was able to pull off convincingly. Speaking of Alison Brie, I want to talk about her performance next. She's obviously known for movies like Promising Young Woman and Horse Girl, and probably more so known for being in the TV show Community. I thought she did a good job in this as well. Naturally, again, the chemistry she has with Franco is fun to see played out on screen. At the beginning of the movie, you get the feeling she is almost borderline obsessed with the guy, as it becomes almost disheartening as the movie progresses to see her almost at times maybe love him less, or at least that's what you're led to believe in certain points. She does a good job at making you feel some level of uncertainty. There's a couple of points where she has to take her performance to be a bit unhinged, which she was good at doing too. There's also a few points in this where she has to deal with a good amount of physical acting, and for some reason it felt a little easier to tell if she was doing some of these parts herself, but again, it could also be the added work of stunt actors and CG. During a lot of the horror moments, she does a good job at conveying fear in these scenes. She even has pretty decent screams, which is always a good sign to have as an actor in a horror movie, of course. There's a couple of times in this movie where she has to be a bit creepy too, and I thought she did a good job during these parts as well. Damon Herriman is also in this movie. He's known for having roles in movies like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and House of Wax. He isn't in this movie all too much, but for the parts he has on screen, he makes the most of his screen time for sure. He carries himself with this overly niceness that you can react differently to. On one hand, you could view Herriman's character as just being an overall nice guy. Whenever he interacts with Brie's character, he's very friendly and always smiling. You may think this if you're an idiot. Most other people will view his character as being this way and immediately think something is up. He's too nice in a way that your radar just starts going off. And over the course of the runtime, from the way he acts, you're basically always thinking to yourself, well, what is he really like? When is the mask going to slip? And I think Herriman does a good job at portraying himself like this. Naturally, with this movie being in the horror genre, he has his share of creepy moments too, and I thought he did a good job at being like this. Usually in previous videos on the channel, I would talk about another side character or two, but really the entire movie is just these three performances. Yeah, there's a character or two that gets a few lines thrown in. For example, example, Alison Brie's character's got this friend who has a fair share of lines, but for me, I don't think these different characters had enough to do for me to talk about their performances, so we can just move on now to the plot. I thought the plot of this thing was really cool. It's so good, you'd swear it was plagiarized for legal reasons. Of course, I'm joking. I'm simply referencing the fact that this movie had a bit of controversy leading up to its theatrical release, as somebody claimed that the screenplay for Together was the exact same as theirs. However, there was never actually substantial evidence to prove this fact, so for me, this just sounds like an example of someone trying to ride the coattails of a movie's hype, which is a little scummy. A similar thing happened when The Holdovers was released, but again, there was never any substantial evidence to back that up either. If you've seen the trailers for the movie, you know what it's about. Franco and Brie's character suddenly start feeling a pull towards each other, which is apparently so strong it physically wants to bind the two of them together, which for a body horror movie is a great concept. The concept alone leaves room for a lot of metaphorical things in the movie, way more than I expected. This movie, at its core, is essentially an allegory for codependent relationships and how to deal with them, and maybe how to make these relationships a little healthier. What I found interesting about this movie especially was this thing flips a usual horror trope that's prevalent in so many movies, which is usually when characters are met with a force they can't explain, or something starts happening in their lives. It's usually the woman that starts questioning it, who will then get put down or even gaslit by the man so that they think they're just going insane. This movie does the inverse of that, where the woman at first doesn't believe the man, and I thought it was an interesting spin on this idea, which I know for a fact is going to piss off a certain amount of people for hurting their fragile masculinity. Seeing the different scenarios of how the relationship develops and sometimes even is harmed is so interesting to see played out. They use these horror concepts, whether it is the physical body horror or even an unexplained supernatural element, to further the idea of this relationship being unhealthily codependent. I thought this aspect was written well. The same can't be said for the actual dialogue, however. Early on in this movie especially, I can't fully put my finger on it, but the dialogue just felt a bit off, and not in a sense that the writers were trying to make the dialogue sound weird for the sake of it. Most of it was just down to weird things the character would say, sometimes bordering on over-explaining things that I feel like could have been easily just shown. As the movie went on, the dialogue got a little bit better, but from time to time at least, it gets off to a rocky start for sure. The latter half of this movie is great, especially in some of the final moments of this thing too, as it's equal parts gross and bittersweet. One part of the plot I personally didn't enjoy is technically something I can't get into if I wanted to avoid spoilers, but there is a certain horror aspect that kind of turns the movie on its head a little bit, and I feel like this movie could have done without that aspect, as it is something that's kind of becoming prevalent in a lot of modern horrors that I feel like nearly over explains why certain things are happening in the movie, but I digress. The cinematography in this movie is really good. It was done by Jermaine Micking. He's done cinematography for movies like the 2021 Mortal Kombat movie, a movie I reviewed on the channel many moons ago when I wasn't competent enough in making videos. I thought this movie was shot pretty well. There is one shot in particular that I thought was just great. It begins with Franco's character going to a pool of water, and the shot begins as if he's being filmed underwater. Then the camera essentially flips to where it's actually on the surface, as if it was looking at a reflection. It's so well done on screen. There's obviously a lot of really great parts as well. There's this really nice shot where Franco and Brie's character are in the cave and the sunlight is shining through, making the foreground all shroud and silhouette. It was really pretty to look at. The lighting in this movie is really creative too. There's a good use of reds, blues, and purples from time to time, which really stick out whenever they're prevalent. Another shot I really enjoyed was one which is used to simulate the growing connection between Franco and Brie's character. It sees Franco in a shower while Brie's character is in a car, and it's filmed from a top-down high-angle shot looking down on everything, and every time Brie's character makes a turn in her car, not only does the camera move in accession with her, but it is intercut with Franco's character and the camera on him doing the same thing. It was really cool to see. With this being a body horror movie, you can bet there's a lot of really nasty stuff prevalent throughout. I'll give it this, it's definitely not as gory as I would have initially expected it to be. Instead, we're treated to the human body morphing and changing with all of the horrible squishy sound effects you can imagine to match. Funny enough, one of of the guys who did special effects for this movie also worked on the movie Upgrade. Seeing the different ways Franco and Brie's character gets connected in this movie can be pretty disgusting to watch. They really thought of many different body parts to stick together as much as your own imagination is willing to go, trust me. For a majority of the movie, a lot of the effects look good, aside from an effect near the end, which is mostly done with CGI, but I can understand that in context of what's happening on screen. This is how this certain effect had to be portrayed, but I do think a little more time could have been put into this effect. However, another reason for it looking like this could be the result of how this is a lower budget movie, since this movie was only made for literally 17 million. Naturally, with this being a horror movie, I gotta talk about whether the movie is actually scary or not. While there are very rare jump scares in this thing, they are used sparingly, thankfully. Whenever they are used, they are usually always pretty predictable and would never get me. There is a moment pretty early on in the movie, which I personally wouldn't consider this to be a jump scare per se, but it's a moment that's very creepy, which plays on some eternal fear. You'll probably know it when you see it. Most of the rest of the horror comes from seeing the changes in the human body, what they go through, and personally, I'm a sick fuck, so I more so just got a kick out of the special effects, the sound effects, and the overall filmmaking aspects, so that I wasn't scared by these moments. But I can appreciate how far they were willing to go to take some of these moments. The average moviegoer will definitely get weirded out by these moments, so there's no worry there. The music in this movie is composed by Cornel Wilczek, who is known for composing the music for Talk to Me and most recently Bring Her Back. This guy is clearly solidifying himself as the horror composer of the 20s. I liked a lot of the original music here for most of the runtime. It plays on being pretty creepy from time to time and usually suits all of the scenes that they're used in. There's also a particular use of licensed music in the movie, which I won't give away. It's at the end of the movie, and it put a smile on my face to hear it, as it's used in such a good way. Overall, I really like this movie. It's always such a delight to see specifically body horror on the big screen. I was lucky enough to catch The Substance when it was playing in theaters, and that was more than a riot for sure. I feel like movies like these are really good to see with an audience that obviously care about what's going on screen. That's not to say the audience I was with had bad theater etiquette or anything of the sort. They were only a handful of people there. My point is, nearly a full theater can be good for body horror movies to share all those visceral reactions with everyone. The horror genre has been going through a pretty great run this year, especially. There's consistently pretty great and more so original ideas coming out, which is also such a delight to see. I'm giving Together 4 stars. It's really well acted with a super cool and original story, even if some of the dialogue leaves a lot to be desired. This thing features effects that will have you squirming, as there is some stuff here to easily gross people out, whether they're horror lovers or not. For all the horror lovers out there, this is definitely a great movie to check out if you're seeking something original. The movie is currently running in theaters, as much as I'm aware, at least in cinemas in the UK and Ireland, but judging by how distribution can be, it could quite possibly be on streaming, but I think the movie is too good not to be seen on the big screen, because it definitely deserves it. This is a movie I for sure recommend.